My name is Palmer Ramsey, and I was 26 years old when I woke up in a recovery room in a Baltimore hospital and realized that the people I trusted most had emptied the account meant to keep me alive. The first thing I felt was the tightness in my chest. Not pain exactly, more like pressure. A reminder that my heart had just been cut open and repaired after a lifetime of being fragile. Monitors beeped steadily beside me. The room smelled like disinfectant and plastic tubing. My throat was dry. My body felt heavy, stitched together by something stronger than fear but weaker than certainty. I reached for my phone with shaking fingers, expecting messages from my parents. They had promised they would be there every step, every update, every night if needed. The screen lit up. A message from my mom. Attached was a photo. Her and my dad, smiling. Not in a hospital hallway. Not in a waiting room. They were standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. At night. Lights glowing behind them. Wine glasses raised. Happy. Relaxed. The text read, "We're enjoying Paris so much. It's everything we dreamed. Back in 2 weeks. Love you." I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. Still groggy from anesthesia, I opened my banking app out of habit. Not panic, habit. The medical fund my grandmother had set up years ago before she passed. The fund meant for surgeries, emergencies, the unknowns that came with a congenital heart condition. The balance refreshed. Ling Meiyuan, $150,000 gone. I told myself it had to be a mistake, a glitch, a delayed update. But something inside me already knew. I had just survived open heart surgery, and the people who were supposed to protect me had chosen a vacation instead. I was discharged a few days later, sent back to my small Baltimore apartment with a bag of medications, printed instructions, and a warning not to overexert myself. "Rest," the nurse said gently. "Your body's been through enough." I closed my apartment door behind me, leaned my weight against it, and let the silence swallow me whole. The couch felt too big, the walls too quiet. Recovery wasn't just physical, it was emotional, and I didn't yet have words for the betrayal pulsing louder than my heart monitor ever had. I opened my phone again. The bank app still showed 0. This time, I called customer service. The hold music played too cheerfully for the moment. When the representative finally came back, her tone shifted, professional, careful. "Yes, Miss Ramsey. A single withdrawal. The full balance. Authorized under trustee access. Several weeks ago. While I was preparing for surgery, while I was signing consent forms, while I was trusting them." I thanked her and ended the call before my hands started shaking too badly. That night, I remembered the moment I signed the authorization. A few months before the surgery, my parents had come over with papers in hand. Hospital estimates, insurance explanations, serious expressions. They told me the hospital wanted large upfront deposits, that insurance reimbursements could lag, that complications were unpredictable. "This is just to be safe," my mom said. "So nothing delays your surgery." They reminded me that the fund existed for this reason, that as trustees, they could handle the transfer smoothly, that I shouldn't worry about money when my life was on the line. I was scared. I was tired. I trusted them. So I signed. I didn't ask for receipts. I didn't ask for timelines. I didn't imagine Paris. Teaching middle school doesn't make you rich. My life before surgery had been careful budgeting, generic groceries, skipped vacations, and summer side jobs. Every spare dollar went into survival. That fund wasn't luxury, it was security. And now it was gone. I called my mom that afternoon. The line connected. I could hear voices, laughter, city noise. Before I could finish my question, she cut me off. "That's adult business, Palmer." And then the call ended. That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a choice. I waited until the weekend and video called them. They answered from a hotel room. Warm lighting, open windows, laughter still lingering in the air. They asked how I was healing. They talked about bakeries, museums, wine. I let them talk. Then I asked where the money went. Silence. Then my mom said it. They used it for the trip. They assumed insurance covered everything else. They said it was now or never at their age. My cousin Remington leaned into the frame, backing them up. "Don't ruin this for them," he said. "They deserve happiness." I reminded them why I signed, what they promised, what that money meant. My mom called me ungrateful. My dad said I was overreacting. Remington told me not to create drama. So I ended the call. And in that quiet moment afterward, something else surfaced. A memory I had ignored for years. The fund had been used as collateral for their Chesapeake Bay vacation home, a condition I barely understood back then, a promise that the balance would never drop below a certain amount. I sat there realizing the truth. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had exposed themselves. That night, I called my Aunt Loretta. She listened. She asked questions. And then she said the words that changed everything. Palmer, this is a breach. I didn't know yet how far this would go, but for the first time since surgery, I stopped blaming myself and started protecting what was left of me. Aunt Loretta came to Baltimore the following week. She arrived mid-morning, knocking softly like she didn't want to scare me. She carried a thick folder under one arm and a thermos of coffee in the other, the kind she always brought to family gatherings when Grandma was still alive. We sat at my small kitchen table, sunlight cutting across stacks of papers I hadn't touched since getting home from the hospital. Lesson plans, medical instructions, bills I hadn't opened yet. Loretta didn't waste time. She spread out bank statements first, old ones, going back years. "Look at this," she said, tapping the page gently. There were withdrawals I'd never questioned, smaller amounts, labeled things like family emergency, temporary advance, home repairs. None of them catastrophic alone. Together, they told a story. "They've been dipping into this fund for a long time," she said quietly. "Your grandmother knew. She wasn't happy about it." I stared at the numbers, my chest tightening again, not physically this time. Loretta pulled out another document, the original trust agreement. She read aloud the clause I had never really absorbed. Funds are restricted solely to medical expenses directly related to the beneficiary's congenital condition. No vacations, no lifestyle upgrades, no dreams deferred. She traced the section outlining trustee responsibilities. If trustees misuse funds, she said, they're personally liable. Personally, that word stuck with me. That afternoon, I sat alone after she left, staring at my phone as messages began to roll in. My parents had landed back in the States. Photos, smiles, souvenirs laid out on their dining table. A caption from my mom, "Best trip of our lives. So grateful." They invited me over. "Come see everything," my dad texted. "Let's celebrate your recovery and our return." I waited 2 days before going. Their house looked the same as always. Warm lights, familiar smell, comfort designed to soften you before the conversation even started. They hugged me, too tightly, too long. We sat in the living room, albums spread out across the coffee table. Paris, Italy, Spain, wine tastings, coastlines. They talked. I listened. And then I asked, again, this time in person, how did the entire fund get used? The room changed instantly. My mom's smile disappeared. My dad crossed his arms. "We already talked about this," he said. "Yes," I replied, "but now I understand what it means." That's when Remington walked in, uninvited, unannounced. He dropped onto the couch beside them like reinforcements arriving right on cue. "You're still on this?" he said. "You survived. Isn't that what matters?" Something inside me snapped, not loudly, but cleanly. I stood up. "That money was never yours." My mom's voice sharpened. "You're being selfish." My dad raised his voice. "You're tearing this family apart." Remington leaned forward. "You're ruining their retirement." The words came fast, overlapping. Accusations layered over guilt, layered over fear. "You don't appreciate what they've done. You've always taken. You should be grateful." I said nothing for a moment. Then I spoke. "You stole from me while I was on an operating table." The room went still. My mom scoffed. "That's dramatic." My dad pointed toward the door. "If you're gonna act like this," he said, "maybe you should leave." So I did. That night, I sent a certified letter to the bank. Not emotional, not vindictive, factual, unauthorized withdrawal, breach of collateral agreement, complete depletion of protected funds. I attached documentation. I mailed it. The calls started 3 days later. Voicemails from my dad. Angry, shaking. Texts from my mom, first pleading, then blaming. Remington escalated. Multiple messages. Long paragraphs. Capital letters. You've destroyed them. You'll regret this. This will follow you forever. Other relatives joined in. Group chats I hadn't been active in for years, suddenly alive again. Some asked me to be the bigger person. Others said nothing at all. Only Aunt Loretta stayed steady. You're not wrong, she said. You're just no longer convenient. The letter from the bank arrived a month later. Thick envelope, official seal. I opened it slowly. The trust no longer met collateral requirements. Immediate repayment demanded. Failure would trigger foreclosure proceedings. I felt something unexpected. Relief. When my parents called that night, they were frantic. The Bay House was at risk. Their dream, their future. My mom cried. My dad shouted. They begged me to fix it. I listened. And for the first time, I didn't explain myself. I didn't defend. I simply said, "This started with your choices." Then I hung up. Winter came early that year. Baltimore streets quieted. My apartment felt smaller but safer. The pressure from family intensified, then slowly faded. Silence replaced chaos. For years, I believed love meant endurance. That night, I realized love without boundaries is just permission. The foreclosure notice arrived before Christmas. A single envelope slipped into my mailbox on a gray Baltimore morning, its weight heavier than it looked. The bank's logo sat in the corner, clean and emotionless, like a verdict already decided. Inside, the language was precise. Dates, deadlines, consequences. If repayment or replacement collateral was not provided within the specified window, the Chesapeake Bay property would be seized and scheduled for sale. No negotiation language. No sympathy. Just process. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after reading it, my coffee growing cold beside me. I thought I'd feel triumph, or guilt, or panic. Instead, I felt still, as if my body finally understood that the chaos had a shape now. My parents showed up at my apartment 2 days later, unannounced. I opened the door to find them standing in the hallway, coats half-buttoned, faces tight with urgency and disbelief. My mom's eyes were red. My dad looked smaller, somehow, like gravity had shifted. "We need to talk," my dad said. I stepped aside. They walked in like guests who no longer knew the rules of the house. We didn't sit. They stood near the door, as if ready to flee at any moment. My mom spoke first. "You didn't have to take it this far." I waited. "You could have come to us," she continued. "We could have worked something out." I looked at her. "I did come to you." She shook her head sharply. "Not like this, not with the bank." My dad's voice rose. "That house is everything we planned for. Our retirement. Our peace." I nodded slowly. "And the fund was my life." Silence. Then Remington's voice came from the hallway. "I told you she'd do this." He stepped into my apartment without asking. Arms crossed, anger radiating off him like heat. "You're heartless," he said. "You know that?" That word hit harder than I expected. Heartless. After open heart surgery. After everything. My mom finally broke. She cried. Loudly. Desperately. "We gave up everything for you," she said. "Years of our lives. Dreams. Stability." I felt something rise in me then. Not rage, not bitterness. Clarity. "You gave up control," I said quietly. "Not ownership." Remington scoffed. "So, money matters more than family?" I turned to him. "No," I said. "Accountability does." My dad stepped forward. "You're ruining us," he said. "If that house is gone, we have nothing." I met his eyes. "You had something," I said, "and you spent it." The room froze. My mom looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. "Who have you become?" she whispered. I answered without hesitation. Someone who doesn't apologize for surviving. The argument exploded after that. Voices overlapping, accusations thrown like weapons. "You're selfish. You're cold. You'll regret this?" Remington pointed at me. "Get out of your own head for once," he snapped. "You're not the only one who matters." That was it. I opened the door. "Leave." They stared at me. I said leave. My dad looked stunned. My mom looked betrayed. Remington laughed bitterly. You think you've won? He said. This will follow you. I held the door open. They left, and when the door closed behind them, my apartment felt lighter than it ever had. The sale happened in early spring. The Bay House went for less than expected. The market was unforgiving. The timeline rushed. My parents lost the dock. The view, the dream they'd built their future around. They moved into a small rental farther inland. I heard this through relatives, through whispers, through updates I didn't ask for. No one called me directly anymore. Not to apologize. Not to explain. Just silence. One evening, weeks later, I found an old voicemail on my phone I hadn't listened to yet. My mom, her voice was tired, flat. We never thought you'd choose this, she said. I deleted it. Not out of anger, out of acceptance. I met with my lawyer one last time to finalize paperwork. He confirmed what I already knew. The breach was documented. The consequences were lawful. My responsibility ended the moment I protected myself. You didn't cause this, he said. You stopped enabling it. That night, I sat alone on my couch, the city quiet outside my window. I touched the faint scar beneath my shirt. My heart was steady. For the first time in my life, so was my boundary. They wanted me to be grateful enough to disappear. I chose to stay. 7 months after the foreclosure, my life looked quieter from the outside. No family dinners. No group chats. No last-minute calls demanding I fix something that wasn't mine to fix. But inside, everything felt steadier than it ever had. My follow-up appointments confirmed what I'd hoped for. The surgery had worked. My heart was strong. The long shadow that condition had cast over my life finally began to shrink. I returned to teaching full-time that spring. Standing in front of my classroom again, whiteboard covered in lesson objectives, students arguing over whose turn it was to read, I felt something unexpected. Ownership. Not over my job, over my life. For years, I'd carried the unspoken belief that my existence was expensive, that my needs were burdensome, that I owed everyone around me for the trouble of keeping me alive. That belief died quietly, somewhere between the hospital bed and the locked door of my apartment. My parents never recovered financially. The loss of the Bay House forced them to downsize in ways they weren't prepared for. Without the asset they'd planned to rely on, retirement became a series of compromises instead of comforts. They blamed me for a long time. Then they stopped talking altogether. Remington disappeared from my life completely. No last message, no apology, just absence. I let it stay that way. Aunt Loretta remained. She called every few weeks, asked about my students, told me about her garden, never once asked me to reconsider my decision. She understood something the rest of them never did. Love that costs your health isn't love. It's extraction. I rebuilt slowly. A new savings account, this time in my name only. Updated beneficiaries. Clear boundaries written into documents, not just feelings. I learned how to say no without explaining myself. I stopped answering questions that were designed to pull me back into old roles. The fixer, the grateful one, the quiet one. I stopped performing gratitude for crumbs. Some nights, the guilt tried to come back. It sounded like my mother's voice, or my cousin's accusations, or the echo of every time I'd been told I was too much or making things difficult. But I reminded myself of one simple truth. I didn't take anything from them. I stopped them from taking from me. People like to believe that setting boundaries will make everything peaceful. It doesn't. It makes things honest, and honesty is loud at first. But peace comes later after the noise fades and the right people remain. Today, I live alone in the same apartment, but it feels different. Not temporary. Not borrowed. Mine. My heart beats steadily. My finances are modest but protected. My life is quiet in a way that feels earned. I don't miss who I was before. The woman who confused endurance with love. The woman who thought survival meant silence. The woman who believed being needed was the same as being valued. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're exhausted from carrying everyone else's comfort while yours keeps getting postponed, if you've been told you're selfish for wanting safety, rest, or fairness, hear this clearly. Choosing yourself is not betrayal. It's survival. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop saving people who are comfortable watching you drown. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If you've ever had to draw a line that cost you relationships but saved your future, I see you. And I hope you choose yourself anyway. Because you're worth protecting.